3, 2, 1.
Look, will be there moving along.
Here we go, guys!
Good afternoon, good morning, or whatever the case may be. You are listening to The Spectator Speaks. I am your host, James MacArthur, coming to you on a Sunday in Baltimore during the calm before the storm. That's right. It's no secret that Hurricane Sandy is coming. I don't watch a lot of TV news, actually almost none of it. The one TV that's in my house just about never comes on. But I'm sure if you watch the TV news, it's nonstop talk about the hurricane. Hurricane this, hurricane that, hurricane here, hurricane there. And it's dominating the news cycle. And rightfully so. You do want people to prepare. You do want folks to be aware. But sometimes, it's a bit of it becomes a bit overwhelming, a bit of a frenzy. It creates panic, and people don't know what to do. So today we're going to talk a little bit about hurricanes and hurricane preparedness, but I'm going to go beyond that because I am Baltimore Spectator, and I've never been known to be one who gets tunnel vision. So I definitely still plan to touch on some of the other important things going on in the city. This is still Baltimore after all, and we're still a city that's, how do I put it? It's a city that's just it's a tough place to live, like my closing theme song says, Old Baltimore by Randy Newman. So we're going to talk about the hurricane. I'm going to give you some history on hurricanes and my personal experience, give you a few tips that I'm pretty sure you're not hearing anywhere. There may not be the most earth-shattering, life-saving tips, but I think practical nonetheless, and so simple that most people, or many people, may have not thought about it. I just want to give a quick shout out to Marvin in Colorado listening in. Marvin sent me a text shortly before the show began, and he said, "Hey, I hear you guys are expecting a hurricane." And he wasn't being sarcastic or facetious, although the media, the news cycle is dominated here by that stuff. I imagine if you're halfway across the country on the West Coast, you're hearing it, but it's probably not taking on quite the frenzied, frenetic pace that we're experiencing here. And of course I said, yes, we are. And I shared something with him that it's very interesting. We get hurricanes here, not frequently, but we are threatened by Atlantic coast hurricanes. In Colorado, they don't get hurricanes, but they get wildfires. As you know, this past summer, many, many, many homes were lost by wildfires. People died. Animals, pets were killed. It's devastating. It doesn't matter where you live in this country. There are natural disasters that can strike at any time. Each region has its own threats that they deal with. Each region has, the different things they have to be concerned with, but it makes sense for you to become familiar with what your greatest threats are and to take common sense preparation. Like a wise man I knew once said, or often said rather, stay ready to keep from having to get ready. If you stay ready, when something is approaching, you don't have to get ready because you're already ready. Got it? No, seriously. There's some things you should always be doing. Some things you should always have. You should never let, your fridge or your pantry run bare where the next meal you have to prepare, you can't even eat unless you go to the store. There should always be some reserves there. Stop running on empty in life. In your home, in your car. It's bad for your car. Don't let it run down to empty every time before you refill. One of these days, if you do that all the time, you're going to go to the gas station and there's not going to be gas. Seriously, I have seen it happen. I worked down in the New Orleans in the Louisiana, Mississippi area post Katrina. You couldn't get gas for miles. Half of Mississippi didn't have gasoline. The gas pumps were literally out. This was after the storm. But for those folks who filled their gas tanks up before the storm, they had gas to get the heck out of there. If they couldn't evacuate beforehand, after the destruction came, they certainly were able to leave and get to a better area. So I urge you again, make sure your car stays full. Don't let it go below half a tank. Just keep it topped off, especially now, but in general. Let's get into this and give you a little bit of background on some of my personal experience with hurricanes. The first, I grew up in the Caribbean. I'm West Indian. Every year we have what's called a hurricane season. With this type of threat that Sandy is bringing to the East Coast is something we experience several times each year. It's a recurring drill. Here we go again. We're being threatened by a hurricane. And after a while, you get used to it. And every so often, a devastating one does strike. And it caused a lot of damage. In 1989, I was living in St. Croix in the United States Virgin Islands. And Hurricane Hugo struck. Hurricane Hugo, at the time, was one of the most devastating hurricanes ever in history. Actually, its name, it was so destructive, they retired the name of the hurricane. It had to be put away, if not literally just at a psychological level, at an emotional level, because of the damage that was done to the islands. Hurricane Hugo was a rare but powerful Cape Verde type hurricane that caused widespread damage and loss of life in all of the Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, and even the southern United States. Hurricane Hugo formed over the eastern Atlantic on September 9th, 1989. Hugo moved across thousands of miles through the Atlantic. It rapidly gained strength to become a Category 5 hurricane along its journey. By the time Hurricane Hugo got to Guadeloupe and St. Croix on September 17th and September 18th, it was maintaining Category 4 strengths. It later weakened by the time it got to Puerto Rico, but still, by that time, it was maintaining Category 3 strength. Several hours later, Hurricane Hugo re-emerged into the Atlantic and was headed for the United States as a Category 2 storm. Suddenly, Hugo regained strength, that's right, and turned back into a Category 4 storm and struck Charleston Harbor down in South Carolina. Hugo did not end until it got to the Lake Erie area, and at that point, it had devolved pretty much, and it was just a remnant of a storm. Hurricane Hugo caused 34 fatalities. Many of these fatalities, actually most of them, was by electrocution and drowning. Hold on, this music is getting more intense than I planned. Wait a second, I'm sorry, folks. Oh man, that's... I'm sorry. This is done live. We don't rehearse this, and I have fun doing it. But as you see, it's not like other radio shows. Maybe that's a little better, where you can actually hear me, and you're not being overwhelmed by the dramatic hurricane music in the background. Hold on, let's listen to some of it. Doesn't that just sound stormy? Can't you just picture like a perfect storm? Huge waves and crashing seas, winds blowing everywhere, reporters hanging on to lampposts as the wind blows them in their silly parkers and raincoats. On St. Croix, the slower speed that Hugo was traveling at, not the speed of the winds that were causing the damage, but the speed at which the storm moved, it allowed Hugo to punish St. Croix with the worst beating of any location in the destructive path of this hurricane. At 2 a.m. local time on September 18th, Hugo's eye struck St. Croix, bringing Category 4 winds to the islands. Winds were sustained, folks, at 140 miles per hour. Some of the gusts exceeded 160 miles per hour. To be honest, at that time, most of the instrumentation did not measure, the instrumentation down there at least, did not measure winds above 150 miles per hour. And we know that all of them were maxed out. The remarkable violence that this hurricane brought to the island spawned many miniature storms within the storm. Tornado-like vortices were seen all over the island by folks down there. You had all of these twisters and swirling winds besides the bigger swirling winds. There was a storm surge of 2 to 3 feet. There were waves 20, 25, 30 feet that were bashing the low-lying islands on the coast. In all, 2 people were killed, 80 people were injured, and this is just on St. Croix. Worse than, well, not worse than that, but beyond that, 90%, that's right, 90% of all the buildings on the island was damaged or destroyed. Can you imagine that? 90% of all structures just gone. Well, it really happened, folks. I was there. All in all, the damage estimates for St. Croix in 1989, after Hurricane Hugo, totaled over $1 billion. The entire infrastructure on the island was wiped out. 6 weeks after the hurricane, only 25% of the public roads had been cleared. It was a no man's land. It was post-apocalyptic Armageddon. 6 weeks later, after that hurricane, only 25% of the people had electrical power. 6 weeks, and people didn't have power. 6 months later, many people on the island were still without power. Folks, Hurricane Hugo was and has been the most